Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Facebook Live, all about sports nutrition. And I'm joined tonight by Tom Shand, who you'll see next to me, but far away from me because you're in Wellington, aren't you, Tom?
I am in Wellington, yeah, chilly old Wellington, yeah.
Yeah, this is the huge advantage of Facebook Lives, is you can be anywhere and talk about anything. So tonight we're going to be going through answering all your questions on sports nutrition. So whether you are going to the gym and not getting the results that you're wanting, or maybe you are wondering if you need a protein powder or supplements, or maybe you're training for an event, whether that event is actually going to happen or not, we're not quite sure yet, but you know.
Shout out to the Wellington Marathon, which just got cancelled last weekend.
Did it? Oh, that sucks, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully one day these events will all be back on, right? So so we're going to be talking all around those different things. So just for anyone who might be new to my page, or maybe hasn't come across my work before, a little intro to me. So I trained as a dietitian and a fitness instructor back in the UK, like nearly 20 years ago, crazy times. And I moved to New Zealand 16 years ago, originally worked for Diabetes New Zealand. Sorry, my voice is echoey. It is, isn't it? I might get my headphones on in a minute. Tom, you do your introduction and I will swap and get my headphones on.
Hi, everybody. It's funny talking to the internet, but my name's Tom. I'm a registered dietitian in New Zealand. I trained in New Zealand in about 2008, 2009, I think I did my training. And I've done various roles, mainly in the community. The last wee while I was doing diabetes and renal, and I've always had a big interest in sports nutrition, so I've always done that on the side, in addition to my other jobs. I've taught sports nutrition at North Tech, which has given me, that was really valuable in terms of thinking about the message, simple messages and things. But right now, I'm actually primarily a stay-at-home dad. My wife calls me the household manager, and she calls herself the CEO. So I do that for about half the time, and then the other half, I work for Mission Nutrition doing sports nutrition. So yeah, here I am.
Now I don't know if I don't think my headphones are actually plugged in yet. So sorry if it's if the sound is funny.
Do you want me to carry on talking, or?
Yes, that would be really, really good. So I'm going to basically, Tom and I are going to be talking about everything to do with sports nutrition. I will stop my echoing in a minute. But I guess the first question I've got for you, Tom, is what are the key things to consider when it comes to getting your nutrition right for sport and exercise? So, there's lots of different types of people out there. What are the main things to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of your audience, Claire. It's probably really varied in lots of different ways. And I kind of break it down into a few ways. So you've got your own personal goals, and then you've got your own personal lifestyle, and then you've got your own personal kind of metabolic makeup and genes and things. And so I think it's really varied depending on all those things. So if you're somebody like myself who's pretty busy, got the kids, my nutrition is as simple as possible, versus somebody who's trying to get into the Olympics and they've got a lot more time to work on that. So and I think the other important thing is to understand that real food is really versatile, and some quite simple changes can have quite a profound effect. So with that in mind, I think the keys are getting the big macronutrients, the ones which are providing you the energy, like the protein and the carbohydrates and fats, getting the intake of that right. But also, I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot, but really good athletes are healthy people, and so you've got to build those foundations as well. Or first of all, build those foundations to make sure that you're healthy.
There you go. Now, can you hear me a little bit better now? I'm hoping it's sounding better with my headphones. You never can get the sound quite right, can you? And I think the one thing around sports nutrition, as you kind of alluded to, is that there's different kind of things that work for different people, and not everybody within sports nutrition is the same. So when I started my background at the beginning, but I trained as a dietitian, but I used to work in professional rugby, and it's such a different environment. Obviously, dealing with someone I was dealing with rugby most of the time, then I was seeing private clients. And when you're dealing with someone who's doing a marathon or, or just someone that's going to the gym to try and, lean up or whatever their goals are, the goals are very different. But one of the kind of
even within rugby, it's so different. Like you've got people trying to be as big as possible, and then other people trying to be as lean and fast as possible, and things like that. So even in those same sports, you've got the big variations of the requirements for them as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's definitely not that one size fits all, is it? And I think that obviously because the supplement industry is so big in this arena, in the sports area, the message of protein has got across. Everyone gets quite confused about carbs. And I mean, certainly from my experience working in professional sport, I think a lot of people thought the supplements were where it was at, but actually sometimes it was, like you said, getting those kind of foundations right. I think that one of the things that I'd like to talk to you about, first of all, is carbs, because in most arenas, carbs are kind of demonized, there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. But obviously in sport, there's some people that are sucking down gels and sports drinks and trying to get as much carb in as possible. Yeah, or other people that are like, should I eat any carbs? Should I not? So what is your advice for everybody who is trying to get fit and or do an event when it comes to carbs?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, eh? I've been through a big journey with carbs. I find it so fascinating. I wrote an article recently, and I described carbohydrates as the Chris Kens of the nutrient world. Like do you know cricket, Claire?
No, I don't. To be completely honest.
Yeah, big blockbusting, awesome player, like extremely valuable. But sort of recently, he got tainted in the match fixing kind of things and all these cheating allegations.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This really powerful cricket player who was amazing on his day, but he's got this kind of like the gleam has been taken off him, and I feel like that's where carbs are at the moment. They're a really good fuel. They're our most efficient fuel. Like our body can use carbs better than any other fuel, but I think they've been kind of damaged by association with the food processing. Like when you take carbohydrate-based foods and you strip all the goodness out of them and you invent new foods from them, like the crackers and biscuits and Tim Tams and all that type of thing. Like they're all carbohydrate foods, but they're lacking all the nutrients of their kind of parents, like the grains and the potatoes and the kumara and things like that. So it's super tricky, isn't it? But I think carbs are an awesome fuel, but then I totally think that it's definitely not a one size fits all approach. Like there are situations when carbohydrates are not ideal. And I've worked in diabetes, and I think there's a big role for a lower carbohydrate diet for some people with diabetes.
Yes, yeah.
Some types of diabetes. And I think there's real potential in ultra endurance to look at a lower carbohydrate diet there. But I don't think there'll be a gold medal at the Olympics won with somebody avoiding carbohydrates anytime ever, maybe, or soon at least. Like there's just such a good fuel for elite performance that Olympic athletes will be using. And professional, fast-paced sports where intensity is key, even like marathons, you're running at a good intensity. Carbohydrates are such good fuel for that, for fueling before and after, but also during the training as well. But then when you take those high-level goals out of it, then it comes down to the person. Some people really enjoy eating without carbohydrates, but I was thinking about this, and crumpets, like a perfectly toasted crumpet with margarine and honey on it, like it's just you can't go past it as far as I'm concerned. So I can't. I've tried going low carb, but I just can't. I can't get past the morning without crumpets. So
it is about exactly that. I think that it is about working for the individual, and I know that certainly from people that I have dealt with along my journey in nutrition, and also just through my life at the gym and various different fitness places that I've worked before, talking to people. I guess the one thing that I always come across quite a lot is people that almost don't have enough carbohydrates sometimes, that they end up like
screwing their training because they're so tired, and they think it's, oh, I'm overtraining. It's like, well, maybe you didn't have enough carbohydrate. And it's not saying start eating stacks of bread. It's just about getting it right. So, I mean, for somebody that is going to the gym, so their goal is, or going to the gym or running, and their goal is to try and, get in good shape, feel good, get fit, but they don't want to gain weight. How much, I mean, when it comes to carbohydrate, how much is enough for somebody in that kind of scenario?
Yeah, good question. So it would vary between the individual, but I'll try and I'm really interested in what you said about the people who aren't getting the results, because I'm going to kind of try and stick to the one analogy through the conversation that we talk about. And I'm going to talk about, when we talk about protein and things, like we're trying to build a house or build a wall out of bricks, and proteins are your muscles, but it's the workers that put the house together, that build that wall. And that's where carbohydrates and fats, the calories, come into it. If you don't have the workers putting those walls up, building those bricks, then you don't build the muscle, and the calories is really important for that. So if somebody's not getting enough calories, then they won't get the results that they're looking for. And carbohydrates are a really convenient, efficient, good cheap source of calories, basically, and that's why they're a bad thing sometimes. But it's why they're also a really good thing for people to use in their training, to fuel their training and get the results. And the second thing about that is what I see a lot, Claire, because I work a lot with endurance, people doing endurance events, is if you don't refuel, particularly after endurance training, if you don't put the carbs back into your body, you get massive cravings later on, and you wind up, I see people making really unhelpful choices, 6 or 8 hours after their exercise, because they haven't replaced those carbohydrates. So they didn't have a carbohydrate-based meal soon after a big training session, and 6 hours later they've got their hand in the cookie jar, making all sorts of choices instead. So there's a real thing in terms of adapting to the stresses that you're putting your body under in training, like getting the results, but also preventing poor decisions later on. I think carbs play a role. But the amount, you asked me about the amount, but I've tried to avoid answering that, Claire. The amount, I mean, if you look at the guidelines, it's anywhere from 3 grams per kg body weight up to 10 to 12 grams. And so what I mean by that is, if you're a 70 kilogram runner, 3 grams per kg body weight would be 210 grams a day. But if you're an Olympic marathon runner who's done a big training session that day, or a Tour de France cyclist, you might be getting 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrates a day. So that's 700 to 800 grams. So you can see that's a huge variation. And then you're going to get people on the low carb buzz who are going to say, Tom, 210 grams of carbohydrates is way too much. You don't need that much. So there's a huge variation, Claire, and it's really personal, but it also comes down to your training goals. And even your training week, like you can have, and you should have, a different amount of carbohydrates each day based on the training that you're doing and the exercise that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic, because it's again, like you said, it's that individualization. But definitely, I guess the summary message is that some people don't have enough and over avoid it, and then, like you said, the cravings and stuff come in. And I mean, I think even just the nature of a lot of people that do exercise and sport and are quite motivated are often quite all or nothing kind of people. And I've never known an environment more than the sports and fitness environment where people can be like extremely rigid with their food and exercise.
Yeah.
And then when it's a party or it's you've never seen so, and that's, that, I mean, it's not a healthy relationship to have with food, is it really, in that regard? But so it's about, like you said, getting the right amount of carbohydrate depending on your different type of sport, getting the right amount. The question then, I guess, something that's obviously promoted a lot in sport and in exercise is around protein. And the market for protein, it's almost like protein makes you get muscle. So can you explain to everybody how what role protein plays in your body, and when it comes to exercise, why protein always gets such a big hype, and should it?
Yeah. Okay. So protein is you eat protein, and in the stomach and the intestines, it gets broken down to amino acids. Or we should say protein foods, so meat, fish, eggs, dairy, lentils, legumes, tofu. So those are the types of foods that you eat. You eat food that gets broken down into amino acids in the intestines, and then they get absorbed into the bloodstream and sent to the muscles. So those amino acids, if we think of them like the bricks that you use to build your wall, being the muscles. Okay, so the amino acids, you put them together, and they form your muscles. So that's what proteins are. Have I answered the first part of your question?
Yeah, you've totally answered it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then the second question is, does it deserve its reputation? I think absolutely, and possibly not in terms of the hype that the supplement market would have you believe, but protein really is essential for building muscle. You've got to provide the building blocks for the muscles to be built. If you don't have enough protein, then the muscles don't get built, basically, and it is as simple as that. Now, what we've learned, what's become clear, I guess, in the last few years, is the amount that you need in a day is starting to become a lot clearer, and it is a lot less than what some people have been doing over the years. And in terms of, they just like, if some protein's good, more protein's better. But now we don't need to have that attitude, because people are pretty confident with the amounts of protein that you need to have in the day.
And in terms of the shakes and the bars and the market of supplements in the protein space, I mean, when does someone need them and when do they not? Because I mean, I see people, going to a 30-minute workout, taking a protein shake afterwards. When do they need them? When do they not?
Okay, cool. You theoretically, probably nobody needs them. You can get all your protein requirements from food. It's not too hard. So in terms of the amount, you're looking at 2 grams per kg body weight, up to 2 grams. That's the kind of the max. So again, say you're an 80 kg person trying to put on weight, 160 grams of protein, which isn't too difficult. So you don't need the protein powders for that type of thing, but that's ignoring the fact that they are really convenient. So if you've been to the gym and and one of your goals is trying to build muscle, then having a protein shake after the gym workout, or if you're going to the gym in the morning and you're at work, a tub of protein powders, it's convenient to have in the office, and it is going to be beneficial having that protein there. However, if you've got the time and the inclination, you could very easily meet your protein requirements through food by taking a sandwich with cold meat and a pot of yogurt, or having some nuts and seeds if you're that way inclined. You can do that, and there's some really interesting research out there, Claire. Like, a good example is this egg study that was done recently, where they got some people to only eat the egg whites and then some people to eat the whole egg, and they kept the amount of protein the same. And the people who ate the whole egg had better muscle protein synthesis. And I think that's just within the context of an egg, right? But when you strip away everything else and turn it into a powder, you can imagine what nutrients you're missing from that. So just by removing the egg yolk from the egg that people were having, people lost out on muscle protein synthesis. But so if you strip that right back down to a protein powder, you're missing out on iron from red meat, you're missing out on calcium from dairy products. So you're missing out on a lot of other nutrients when you do that. But protein's good, and if that's how it's easy for you to get it, then it probably is worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I've said to people, it's about convenience at the end of the day, isn't it? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think so.
And finances, really, and if you can afford it, and if it's, because I mean, they are super expensive. Would you if you were working with somebody and talking about saying they have a busy life and you recommended a protein shake? There's obviously a lot on the market. Do you tend to recommend ones that have the creatine and the extra amino acids and the branch chains and everything, or are you more of a 100% straight whey person, or bit of both?
Well, the whey one's interesting because a lot of people are vegetarian now, so they're not into that. So there's a bit more of a market for the vegetarian-based protein. But the creatine and the branched chain amino acids. So creatine. I'm not sure if we'll have time to discuss supplements in more detail, but creatine's an awesome supplement and it's really well validated. But it's about getting the dose right. So when you start mixing protein powders with other things, you're all of a sudden like, if you want to have X amount of protein, how much of that creatine are you getting, and is that a worthwhile dose of that? So I actually don't believe in having like 2-in-1s and 3-in-1s. You should keep your protein powder as your protein powder, so you can use it as and when you want, and keep your creatine separate, so that you know that you're getting the right dose of that creatine product. And then you mentioned the BCAAs and things like that, and so those are the branched chain amino acids. There's 3 of them identified. Well, when I was training, they were being talked about. That was 10 years ago, so I'm sure it's been longer than that. But the branched chain amino acids are actually a bit out of fashion now. There's only one of them which is really considered, really great for sports nutrition. That's leucine. So branched chain amino acids as a whole aren't they're not considered a worthwhile supplement. But as long as you're getting enough leucine, which you can easily get from your whey protein powder and things like that. But yeah, whey protein is considered a really awesome supplement. It's kind of like the gold standard, which the other ones are trying to catch up to that. It's really rich in leucine. It's really complete protein and rapidly digested, so it can increase your muscle protein synthesis really quickly.
Yeah.
And basically, all the other types of protein are trying to catch up to whey in terms of the quality of the protein that you're getting.
So if we think now about so there's the concept around the nutrition and the carbs and the protein, and with that, right, the different scenarios that people find themselves in, the practical scenarios. So if we've got let's say your person that goes to the gym a couple of times a week, okay, maybe they go in the morning or maybe they go after work. Their goal is to get a bit fitter, get a bit leaner, improve their health and well-being. First question: if they exercise in the morning, that person that is just trying to lean up a little bit, do they need to eat before? And if they're going to eat afterwards, what should it be and how soon afterwards? So our average person trying to get fit and healthy, what do they need to eat before and after exercise?
Yeah, I would say that they wouldn't need to eat before, unless it's convenient for them to do so, or unless they really feel like they want something in their tummy before they go. But it's certainly not necessary. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, if I used to do park run quite a lot. It always starts at 8 a.m. So it was a really awkward time for me, because by 8 a.m. I'm hungry, right?
Yeah.
Probably been awake for 2 hours watching the kids eat. So I had to work out what the right amount was, and it turned out to be 1 or 2 Weet-Bix and some milk, but I wouldn't have my full-blown breakfast. So I think the reason I raised that is for the example of it's often the way that it makes you feel in the moment, rather than any science behind it. So that's more important. So, but in terms of the science, no, you don't have to eat before a workout like you were describing.
No, and I do see a lot of people. One thing that I have often witnessed and is people eating a banana and then walking into the gym. And I'm always reminding people that if you eat the banana, it just goes and it'll sit in your stomach while you're in there. So if you're gonna eat, how long before, is that even a sentence? How far before does it need to be? If you're going to actually eat before that morning workout, how far in advance does it need to be?
Yeah, I would put that down to the person as well. But I kind of think you want it in there for half an hour. But if you look at if you look at guidelines, they will say at least an hour for it to get through the system and start to be utilized by the body. If not 2 hours. If you look at standard sports nutrition guidelines, it's consume your pre-exercise meal 2 to 4 hours before exercise. If you're going to the gym at 7 in the morning on the way to work, you're not going to get up at 5 have your banana or your. So I get around that by I'll choose a really low fiber, easily digestible carb like a banana. But yeah, I'll try and do it a bit before I do whatever exercise I'm doing, or a honey sandwich, or nothing. But sometimes I feel like something. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so in that afterwards, so somebody again, one mistake I often see people make is that they exercise and then they end up actually eating, and their goal is to kind of get fitter and leaner and whatever else, and then they end up eating more and they kind of like overcompensate compared to where they are. So how soon is it, there's been this kind of notion that you have to kind of eat your breakfast as soon as you finish your exercise. So if you are exercising in the morning, or even in the evening, and then you're going home and having your dinner, how soon does that meal have to be? Does it matter?
No, pretty much. In terms of they talked about the anabolic window, or the window of opportunity after exercise, and that's basically being refuted to a certain extent. They don't know exactly how long it is, but it's hours long. It's like at least 6 hours long, that you're going to get the benefits of it if you eat. You don't need to worry about it pretty much. That being said, like, it's a matter of convenience. I think for the person that you're describing, Claire, if you're just trying to get fit and healthy, lose a bit of weight, lean up, that type of thing, just fit it around your day. Like, if you're going to the gym after work, go home and have dinner. If you're doing it in the morning, like maybe, and you're having breakfast at work, like, try and just make that a really healthy meal. Or I should say a nutritious meal. Give yourself the nutrition that you need. I think that's more important, and that's what I kind of go back to. Like, I have this I talk to people about your training is not finished until you've had your recovery meal, and that actually flies in the face of that more recent science saying that recovery window is really long. But I also think it's a really good, you're in that healthy mindset, and we've talked about this, Claire, before, in terms of habits. When you link those two habits together, like a workout and then a nutritious healthy meal, then that can be a really good thing. Like, you can kind of keep the momentum going through that meal, and you've got to eat at some point, Claire. So if it's after training, then fine. You've got to eat at some point during the day. Why not?
But it's also how, like you said, that how, if you don't eat soon enough, then you often get caught out by what do you eat when you eventually find food. And a lot of getting results in when you're exercising is actually how the whole day kind of pans out. But I definitely, I mean, and you would have seen this as well, obviously, the overcompensation, what people perceive that they burn off in a gym workout, and then they're like, well, I've been to the gym, so I can drink 2 glasses of wine. It's like, you probably didn't even burn off the glasses of wine. And even if you did, I mean, one thing this is my personal opinion, I don't ever think that people should feel that exercise is burning off not unhealthy food, but that kind of like, I exercise to burn off my wine. I think they should kind of be separate.
Because exercise is so powerful that to equate it purely to weight and nutrition, to like kind of only think of exercise in terms of your weight,
burning off calories is not good.
To exercise, because exercise is doing so many good things for your body, that to purely put it in the weight basket is a shame. I know what you mean, Claire. And I was going to say something about that, but it's left my mind.
That's because you've got children, and it's amazing. It's amazing neither of us have actually had children that have kind of come in. So if we go from this, okay, so we've had the person that's kind of exercising first thing in the morning. We've had quite a few questions come through about teenagers and boys, fitness, sports, rugby, because there's a lot of the like Powerades. Do they need like boys? I've got a 6-year-old, and I cannot believe, the whole like teenage boys eat loads of food. I'm like, I thought it was going to be when he was like 12, not when he was 6. Active kids, or just girls doing gymnastics and all that kind of stuff. How, any tips around those kind of weekend sports and how to work around those?
Well, this is a real complex issue, I reckon, Claire, and you might have an opinion on this. Like, in some ways, I think that we've got to stay out of their way. Do you feel like people are losing the ability to self-regulate their nutrition in a way?
Yes.
And by me getting in there and saying teenage boys should eat this much, it's kind of muddying the water even more. Like, for sure, there's a place for a dietitian or nutritionist to have an influence over a teenager's diet, but in a forum like this, I feel like teenagers are growing so fast, they're eating so much, they're so active. Like, we almost need to get out of their way in terms of telling them what to eat. Okay, Powerade and Coca-Cola and things like that. Like if you can avoid that type of thing, then yeah, there should be some boundaries around that. But do you kind of know what I mean? Like in terms of like establishing, like trying when they're young to give them the tools to have a healthy relationship with food, rather than seeing food as a combative thing that they've got to sort of figure
adhere
out.
to.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
or
think the fact is
adhere
that
to,
we're actually like you said, born with this ability to regulate our appetites, and kids, I think one of the challenges is just all the dreadful options that are available, readily available, and I guess the marketing things. I mean, I was talking about it on the TV yesterday. Like, there's these snack packs of processed meats that have got like strength and stamina on the front of the packet. It's like, it's kind of a minefield, really, isn't it, in that space? But it's just helping make those choices, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really complicated, because that's going to influence them, and it's going to make it harder for them to regulate when they're getting those messages. So I think, if you think about like what is a healthy diet, and if you just got a pantry full of real food that that isn't in packets and things like that, and a fridge full of that as well, and you say to your teenage kid, go to town, eat what you like, then they might not be so inclined to just eat too much of that kind of junky food, which at the end of the day is specifically designed and intentionally designed for the kids to overeat and eat too much of, and not want to stop eating it. So
next on to so we've got our kind of the person that's trying to maybe go to the gym, be fit and healthy, lean up a little bit. So summarize that is basically you don't need to eat before exercise if you're not hungry. The meal doesn't need to be as soon as possible, but it doesn't need to be straight away. It needs to be something that's nourishing. But try and help yourself make a good choice. Avoiding thinking of exercise as burning off calories. And then the other thing on that one would be just, again, that it is okay to go lower carbohydrate in that regard. I mean, not stripping back the carb, but that you obviously don't need to be eating massive amounts if that's your kind of goal. So what about somebody who, like at the gym that I go to, people go every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, and they got a lot of it's the one I go to is very strength-based training, but also there's those people that are trying to gain muscle. So for guys or girls where their primary goal is to I guess that might be some strength-based training for even to compete. Where does that fit with the kind of protein message and the timing of food for those particular types of people? Do they need a lot more protein than other people? Where do they fit?
Yeah, so they've got this. If you look at the ranges of your protein intake, I think the Ministry of Health's ranges, I think it's like 0.8 grams per kg body weight. So an easy way of thinking about that would be, if you're 100 kilograms, then you eat 80 grams of protein in the day. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's just basically to prevent malnourishment, right? Like that's the sort of the minimum that you want to be healthy.
Yeah, at Healthy Food Guide, we used higher numbers than that. For years and years and years. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's the bare minimum, right? And so the people that you're talking about, they're at the opposite end of the spectrum, and the science is the upper end of the guideline is about 2 grams of protein per kg body mass. So if we take, you've got a big, strong people in your gym, let's call them 100 kgs again. So they could be eating up to 200 grams of protein. Let's say you've got 3 meals in the day. That's, say, 50 grams of protein in each meal, and then 25 grams in a couple of snacks. That's quite a lot of protein to be fitting into a day, right? So I think for those people, like, there is no harm in thinking, I've got to eat quite a lot of protein here. Maybe I should have some before my workout, and I will have some after it, just because I've got limited time in the day to eat enough anyway. So I think for those people, it kind of changes, because it's not easy to eat that amount that they need to, and higher protein intakes to a certain point, up to about 2 grams per kg body weight, have been shown to really increase your ability to build muscle. And it depends on your motivation, because those same guidelines which I'm talking about, the lower end of those guidelines, are down around 1.4 to 1.6, depending on exactly who you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is the option of going down to that lower end if you're not really going for it. And I mean, because it's going to cost you money to eat that protein. It's going to cost you time and prep and things like that. So you can go down to about 1.4 to 1.6, depending on how seriously you're taking it. If you want to eat every possible inch out of all that work that you're doing in the gym, then up to 2 grams. But if you're just happy putting on a bit of muscle and kind of pleased with your progress, then you can get away with less.
Yeah. And that, like you said, I mean, actually to eat like that actually requires some organization and planning. But luckily, a lot of those people that do go to the gym multiple times a day or do that strength-based training are often those kind of people anyway. But it's definitely, like you said, going for that whole food as often as possible. And thinking as the supplements as the icing on the cake.
Yeah, for sure.
Really?
Just thinking about, I reckon the egg study that I talked about earlier is just so interesting because, like, we talk about fats, protein, carbs, and all the micronutrients, but there must be so much stuff in food that we don't know about that's doing all these good things. Like, we're just scratching the surface. And when you strip all that out and have it in supplement form, then we must be missing out.
It's not the same. No, totally. I mean, absolutely. Right, I've got some questions here. What is around endurance training? So the next type of group of people that we're talking about are those that are doing multiple hours of exercise. So a couple of questions on that, which will kind of help us, is what's the difference between like gels and raisins? So for somebody that is doing that, what's the best source of carbs for long distance running? Does it matter whether it's a sandwich or gels? And any tips and tricks for those people that are doing endurance kind of training?
Yep. Okay, cool. So I'll start with the tips and tricks. That's a good place to start, actually. In my work with endurance people, the thing I'm basically constantly telling people is the more carbs you can have during exercise, the better. So people often have like maybe a gel an hour, or even, they might take one gel on a 3-hour bike ride or a 2-hour run or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're getting about 25 grams of carbohydrates from a gel. Whereas the science will say that you can have up to 90 grams an hour. And at about 80 grams an hour, the benefit starts to taper off a bit. But you're still getting more benefits from consuming 80 grams of carbohydrates an hour than you are at 60 grams of carbs. So even if you double the carb intake of those people, they're still going to get more intake, more benefit by even increasing that further.
Wow.
It's amazing how much carbs you can tolerate. And it's amazing when you look at the science, the benefit that it has on performance. This is, of course, ignoring the whole low carb, high fat paradigm, which is a different conversation. So yeah, carbohydrates, the tips and tricks, I would say that most people would benefit from having more carbs during exercise, during the training sessions that you're describing, like those longer ones when they're really looking for a good quality training session or a race, for example. So that segues nicely to the raisins versus gel question, which somebody asked. So the ability to tolerate, now this is going to be tricky to explain, I'll do my best. The ability to tolerate up to 90 grams of carbohydrate relies on there essentially being two tunnels out of your intestines into your blood. And different carbohydrates go through different tunnels. So if you can imagine, only red cars are allowed in this tunnel and only blue cars are allowed in that tunnel. If you're only giving yourself the red cars, then you're going to get a traffic jam, right? Because you're not utilizing that second tunnel. So what gels do is they're formulated to have the right balance of those carbohydrates. So there's the ratio of fructose to glucose that is going to allow up to 90 grams an hour to be absorbed. So the danger when you're having the real food like the raisins is that they don't have the balance right. Like, nature didn't just come across that perfect balance. And so same with bananas or bread or, recipes like flapjacks and rice cakes and things like that, which are really awesome in the right context, but they're not the exact right ratio to really maximize that absorption.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I'd say about that is gels contain everything that you need and nothing that you don't for during exercise.
Yeah.
whereas raisins, they contain fiber, and bread contains fiber and some protein and fats and things like that, which aren't beneficial for that marathon kind of length training. So your body's going to have to digest and absorb them when it doesn't need to, basically. So that's the issue there. However, I definitely recommend taking whatever, if you really like bananas or raisins or sandwiches. What people take, chip sandwiches, things like that. I've got a recipe for my mum's date loaf, people swear by, rice cakes, things like that. They're really good to break up the monotony of gels and things like that.
Particularly for exercising for hours and hours on end.
Yeah, and it's just so nice knowing that you've got that literally in your back pocket waiting for you, and things like that. My other recommendation would be to drink your carbs as well, because eating's a bit of a pain when you're exercising, and most people are good at hydrating themselves, drinking water. So that is the one time when those sugary drinks like the Powerades, the Gatorades, we'll throw out some New Zealand brands like Pure Sports Nutrition and Peak Fuel and R-Line, those ones which are providing carbohydrates in the liquid form, you're kind of doing two birds with one stone. You're getting the water and you're getting the carbs. So you need to eat less if you're drinking the carbs. So that's another good tip, actually, is drink your carbs as well as eating them.
Now, just to let everyone know that's watching, Tom has put together some top tips, which you can download. So if you go to, there should be a link at the top of this somewhere hiding, you can download, and it's just 10 practical tips to take away from the session this evening. So if you want any of those tips, let them know. Also, there's just a couple of questions around, obviously, how much carbohydrate and how much protein is in various different foods. I will find those for you. We've done them before. There's links to various different places that we can send, so that you can just get some examples of, obviously we've talked about grams per kilo and stuff like that, but just to understand a little bit more about because
I was really I thought to myself, you must say, Tom, that when you talk about grams per kilo of protein, that's not the food, it's the protein in the food. So say if I'm saying that somebody needs to have 40 grams of protein in a meal, that doesn't mean that they eat 40 grams of, say, meat. They don't eat 40 grams of meat. It's, it's 90 or 100, 120 grams of that meat kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's just, and I think it's the biggest thing that we've learned so far tonight is the fact there's different things for different types of sport, and it is obviously the complexity of your job. And when someone's sitting down with you, the advice that you give them is hugely variable depending on whether they are, just doing a couple of runs a week versus if you're on a bike and you're on it for hours and hours and hours. Obviously, it's really, really different, and that's where that's the nature of the kind of the great thing about getting individualized advice in this space around sports nutrition, because it's so huge. And I think that the biggest thing that why I actually really liked working in sport when I was just small tweaks can make massive changes, to your performance, because I think people put so much time and energy into exercise sometimes, and they undo it all by just getting little things not quite right with their nutrition, by missing, not getting enough protein afterwards, or like you said, either having too much carbohydrate, not enough carbohydrate, overcompensating. So that's those kind of main things. What I did want to ask you, sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, training creates the potential for adaptation, but it's when you've finished the training when that adaptation actually happens. So if you just went for a run, you don't get fitter during that run, you get fitter after it. Or if you go to the gym, your muscles aren't getting bigger during that gym session, they're getting bigger after it. So that's why you need you provide the nutrition after it so that the adaptations can take place.
That's a really good. So otherwise, actually, the next question I was going to ask you is about recovery. So when you've done a workout, or you've got on your bike, or you've run, or whatever you've done, what has happened to your body, and what kinds of food, what examples, what would you eat? Like if we're talking about whole food, what are some examples of things that you'd have for recovery, and the nutrition balance of that?
Yeah, okay. So the balance isn't too different depending on the well,
Love sports nutrition. There's never one size fits all.
And I'm like, well,
But
actually it is, but no. So I'll start off, say, the gym guy or girl who's been to the gym. They're looking to build a bit of muscle. So after it, having some protein, and again, we talked about the window is pretty big, but like at some point during the day, you're going to be working towards meeting your protein requirements. So the first part of your question is what's happened to your body. So you've kind of like told your body a story. You've said I'm the type of person that needs to lift big weights or something like that. And then so the body goes after it. It's like, man, I'm gonna have to go and lift big weights the whole time. How can I do that better? I'm gonna have to grow bigger muscles. So your muscles become really the ability to grow is kind of maximized during that period after training. So if you feed it the nutrients to allow it to grow, it will grow. So that's why protein, because protein is the building blocks of muscle. It's built, it's the bricks in the wall that we're building. So if you give it those bricks, then the muscles are like, we need this, because next thing you know, this guy's going to ask us to lift all those weights again. So I want to build this wall, and so that's why providing the protein. But I also, what happens is it's called muscle protein synthesis. It's muscles and the protein in the muscles, and synthesis is the building of those proteins, and that gets turned on, and that exercise stimulates that to turn on. So that process gets turned on, and then if you're got your nutrition sorted, you provide the substrate for that. You provide protein and amino acids so it can actually happen. But that will get switched off if your body detects that there's not enough overall energy around. If it feels like, oh, there's not a whole lot of energy here, actually I'm going to save that energy, save those proteins for my immune system, which is actually more important than bigger muscles, then it's actually going to switch off that muscle protein synthesis pathway. So that's why to build muscles, you actually need to include carbohydrates or fats, and preferably a combination of that in those meals following the exercise as well. And it's not a hell of a lot different for endurance exercise. You've told your muscles a different story, but they react in a similar way of wanting to remodel themselves to be able to run 3 hours again next week. And so they're gonna go through a remodeling phase, which requires protein. But also, what you're doing when you're consuming carbohydrate after endurance exercises, you're actually topping up those fuel stores. You've burnt through all the carbohydrates in your body. You don't have a big supply of carbohydrates in the body. You've burnt through it all. And so you need to refuel yourself. You need to top up the petrol tank so that, the next time that you go to exercise, that you've got fuel stores there. Or in a more practical sense, like if you go for your training run on Sunday, you've got energy to run around after the kids on Sunday afternoon, or socialize, or whatever it is that you do in the afternoon. You've got to provide the energy to do that. So the carbohydrates do that.
So what kinds of foods, like in terms of example, like is it? Often people smoothies is a thing that people have after exercise. Like what are some examples of meals that are really good balance of protein and carbs after training?
So breakfast cereals and milk, and yogurt and fruit is a good combo. You're getting the protein from the milk and the yogurt, and the cereals are providing you with carbohydrates. They're generally fortified with iron or vitamin B12 or something like that. And then the fruit is giving you all those things, like I mentioned earlier, that we just don't know what they are, but they seem to be really good for us. So getting some fruit in there is a good thing. I'm a big fan of baked beans, eggs, and bacon on toast after a particular exercise of any type. Couple of eggs, bacon. So that's about 20 grams. 2 eggs is 14 or 15 grams. So throw a bit of extra from the baked beans or the bacon, and get the bread in there, and some fruit on top of that is a good one. Sandwiches are really good. So you could get a tin of tuna between a couple of sandwiches, and then you've got the opportunities for your lettuce and tomato. The vegetarians out there might like me to hear me talk about some nuts and seeds, really good sources of protein. Falafel, having some falafel in the fridge is a good idea for quick protein. Lentil salads, things like that.
The real, I mean, it's real balanced food, isn't it? It's a combination of carbohydrate, protein. And I think it's often, I guess the mistake that a lot of people make just generally is that some of their meals are probably too low in protein, other than dinner. And it's a reminder that if you're eating after you've done exercise, that meal needs to be, and that vegetables are always a good thing. Always a good thing.
Yeah, always a good thing. Yeah, I'm hopeless at social media, Claire. But the only social media post, well, not the only one, but I thought I'm going to get back into social media, and I did a post, and I was like, the one thing which everybody agrees on is that vegetables are good.
Yes, no one disagrees with that.
I don't think I've posted since then, but I think that's the truth, eh?
Yeah, that is absolutely the truth.
Nobody can argue with that.
Yeah. So what about supplements? So I mean, there are within sport, which are the ones that are worth it and which are the ones that are just not? Again, obviously there are so many different types of sports, but which, in the top tier, the A group, what are they?
Yeah, so it depends on your goals, but you can split it up into kind of three broad categories. You've got your sports. Where are my hands? I won't bother. You've got your sports food, so things like protein powders and gels and things like that. And we've kind of talked about how they can play a role. They're convenient and potentially can enhance performance. And then you've got your ones to prevent deficiencies and people who are at risk of that. So maybe if you're taking your endurance exercise really seriously and you're a vegan or something like that, and your iron levels are low, so something like iron becomes a recommended supplement in that situation. I should say at the start, I'm kind of drawing on the Australian Institute of Sport have a classification system where they've got the class A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
The A ones are the ones that the Australian Olympic athletes will use. B, C, and D they don't use. And I'm talking about the group from Group A here. So they've got the sports foods, and then they've got the kind of the micronutrient based ones like calcium or iron or vitamin D in certain kind of clinical situations. But then the interesting, I guess, kind of the interesting ones are the performance enhancing ones, which are the cool ones. So there's only a handful of them. I just double checked see whether I was up to date, and it's caffeine. Now, caffeine was banned for a while, and for good reason, because it's really good at improving performance.
Yeah, and also incredibly dangerous if you take it in. That guy that died from the powder form.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah. So, but caffeine is legal now, and so it was just too hard to control, and so that one's a good one. Creatine has, the science is unequivocal about its benefits for performance. So creatine is, if you're trying to get bigger, stronger, faster, then creatine's a good one for that. There's a couple of interesting ones for sort of like short to middle distance runners, like beta-alanine and sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda, which you find in your cupboard. So they allow you they buffer the acid in your body. So if you're doing like repeated sprints and things like that, they're really good. And I should premise this with please seek individualized advice.
Yes, don't just go to your cupboard tonight and start getting into the old bicarbonate soda.
You'll get some gnarly side effects, which won't help you sleep. But you can, those are in that A class. And what else have we got there? Glycerol, I think, is around hydration. I'm pretty sure that's new. I was surprised to see that one in there. I think that's been upgraded from B to A. Yeah. So those are the main ones.
Yeah, that's really good. And actually,
nitrates.
Nitrates, yes, the old beetroot situation.
Yeah, beetroot, good for marathon runners. How much time we got? I won't go into a personal story about nitrates because people.
We'll answer some of these questions first of all. So Devon has asked, can eating too little while exercising damage my metabolism?
Yeah, well, damaging metabolism, that's a tricky question to answer, but I guess damage your metabolism. I think it's
damage
not necessarily
your body, yes.
Damage your body, but and you're not going to be getting all the benefits from the exercise that you could, I would say. yeah, when you're exercise is such a beautiful mechanism for like nourishing your body. It like opens your body up to absorb all these nutrients from food, and it loves all the iron and the calcium and the carbohydrates and the protein that you give it during that time. So I think it's a really good time to like nourish your body around exercise. And yeah, there are relative energy deficiency symptoms. Devon, females can have, problems with their reproductive systems and things like that from not having enough energy. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things again in sport that I think exercise is often seen as something. Obviously, it's really good for you, but there is that balance there where obviously, if you're not fueling your body right, you might look amazing.
Yeah.
But that actually doesn't. What's going on the inside isn't right. Lucy's asked, is there no cut-off time to have protein to make it better to diminish the cravings for crap later on? So is there, I mean, basically it's just, if you eat sooner, you're less likely to eat crap within, I mean, I try and eat within an hour, not because of the science, just because actually it's practical. Try and eat within
I think to answer Lucy's question, the sooner the better. The science question is a different one. It's like, it's when do you need to eat in order to maximize muscle building? And there's no real, that window is quite big. But Lucy's window, I reckon, like you say, is much smaller. Like, I think it's good to get that nutrition in. And so to answer her question, I mean, I think it's up to her, like if she can, I can't crystal ball gaze that one and tell her what's best for her. But maybe the sooner the better. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I always suggest to people is like, try different things, but as long as you're only just changing one thing. So like, try and eat the banana half an hour before. If it doesn't work for you, try not. Move your breakfast a little bit sooner, later, but as long as you're kind of playing with one thing. With regards, so we've got to, if you're taking a post-workout supplement within 1 hour or straight after the workout, I think maybe that's the same question about, I presume a post-workout supplement is a protein powder. There's no pills that I'm aware of.
They put funny things in post-workout supplements, but some of them get combined with carbohydrates, and I think that's a good thing in a post-workout supplement. Although earlier I said that it wasn't. I think when you're mixing the creatine and things like that, it's not so good. But like, if you got, I think it reminds people that you should have the carbohydrates after exercise as well. But yeah, the protein after, I mean, it's kind of going back to that convenience thing, like having it there ready to go is good, but you don't need to have it within that hour. But then, it can save some poor decisions. It can give you energy for the rest of the day as well.
Yeah, and there's quite a few questions about kids here. So my daughter enjoys multiple codes. Is it better to have carbs before each game and recovery afterwards? I mean, I think one of the things around fitness at the kids at the weekend. I mean, kids are their own. Sometimes it's hard to get them to eat, and sometimes it's hard to. Yeah.
So I think what I tell people is fuel the exercise. So if you're out playing whatever sport, it sounds like this one's playing multiple, like hockey and netball, let's say, then I think that using the sport as a motivator for her and the potential role for food to improve her performance can be quite powerful for some people. And because food can be so negative sometimes, especially in teenage girls or even younger, it can have those negative connotations, but talking about the positive impact that food can have on performance can be really powerful. So carbohydrates is recommended prior to team sports, topping up the tank. And then if you look at recovery, you've got to refill that tank before that next game as well. So I don't know, I guess my tip for this question might be to use that car analogy. Like, you've got to have petrol in the car, put some petrol in before the game and top it up again after it with those carbohydrates and the protein. And look, if you're going to have treat foods, then around exercise is not the worst time to have them, because like I say, your body's so hungry it'll absorb them really quickly. And if that motivates your child to to get to the second game or something, then maybe you can work out a kind of a strategy around having a sometimes food around the sport there.
Yeah, and it tends to be with most teenagers training, it's just eating enough, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
because they have lunch and then. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to, particularly when you're out all day, if you're kind of like, Saturday sports, Sunday sports, it's a lot of it's actually just remembering to take something with you.
Yeah. And you wonder whether they're eating their lunch, and then they're going into a training after school as well. So so having some extra food prior to that, I think, is a good thing. Yeah.
There's a question about vegetarian and vegan. Well, someone liking to become vegetarian, but have got dangerously low iron levels.
Right.
How can iron be increased on a plant-based diet? I've got something that I'll link to you on that. But I mean, it can be done, but it's hard. Let's just say that. Would you agree, Tom?
Yeah. Yes, I would agree. It is hard. I mean, the trips and tips would be avoiding probably tea and coffee around the meal times with your vegetarian iron. I was going to say, vitamin C enhances iron absorption, but vegetarians usually don't have a problem with that in their meals. Just making sure that you choose an iron-rich food at each meal. So, like, even fortified cereals, like a lot of people make their own muesli and things like that. But the one benefit of a cereal, commercially prepared one, is that they're often fortified in iron, so that can be a good time to get some iron in if you're vegetarian. But then I am concerned if she's already got dangerously low iron levels, she needs to get those corrected first.
Yeah.
And that's a medical kind of, see the GP conversation where
go and get your bloods checked. And I mean, I was vegetarian for 14 years, and I just couldn't keep my iron high without supplements constantly. And it's just, there's reasons for it, but it's there's just nothing I could do. There's no amount. And even now, I mean, I still have the same issue now, and that's, some people have that struggle and some people don't, right? But
I find it really interesting because my wife has better iron levels than me, but she eats no red meat and very little chicken, whereas I was raised on a farm and ate red meat constantly until I met her. And now my red meat consumption's gone way down. So it's as though she's really good at absorbing her iron and I'm really bad at it because I was raised on an iron-rich diet. So I think it's personal as well. Yeah,
and again, because nutrition is a relatively new science, it's all this stuff that we don't know, and it's not. I think one of the biggest things that people need to remember about nutrition is it's not just what goes in your mouth; it's actually what your body is capable of absorbing, and a lot of that comes down to gut health and all these other things that we're finding out about as as the time goes on. Now I'm just aware that we're on our hour of time, so I'll just say that to anybody that may have joined later, or we've got Tom's an amazing handout with his top tips. So if you go to the link on the top of this, you'll find that. And also, I'll hand over to you, Tom, to say a little bit about how you help people individually. So Tom obviously works with me at Mission Nutrition and sees people one-on-one, and you can come and see him. And also, if you've got insurance, you can claim back on your health insurance to see a registered dietitian. So that's a good thing to know. How do you help people, Tom, and what kind of things do you do when you see someone one-on-one?
Yeah, I ask a lot of questions. I really like to know the person because I think that's such a big part of it. So what I try and do is I really try and make sure that my advice is personalized, like really personalized. So like getting to the crux of the matter and making sure it fits in with somebody's lifestyle, and finding out a lot about their goals, like what their goals are, what their food preferences are, like what they want to change, what they don't want to change. And then and I love coming up with, because sometimes I don't like admitting this, but I'm not a real foodie, so I'm very good at coming up with simple, practical ways to improve your nutrition, because that's kind of my level, is just like the simplest and most practical way of getting the nutrition into you. Some of my recipes which I give out are not delicious. That's why I link to you, Claire.
I've got plenty of delicious recipes.
Yeah, exactly. I let other people do that work. I'll put a link to some recipes. But I really try and get the simple, practical advice, which is personalized. And I do a lot of listening. I ask a lot of questions, and I do a lot of listening to how I can help people.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of it is about getting the right advice for you and your lifestyle. And I think it's one of the things in that's one of the problems with nutrition is someone will have a journey and something will work for them, and then they'll go and tell someone else. But it's like even a set of twins don't have the same response to various different situations. So actually it's about like you said, and as one of the messages that's come through really clear tonight is actually when you actually listen to your body, particularly the sport, and you try various different things, you will find the path that works for you. But generally speaking, it's about eating more whole food. You know, often it's going back to the basics and not being terrified of carbohydrate, but you know, getting it in its right place, really. So what I will do, Tom, if there's any of the questions that we haven't answered, we'll come back to you on those online, and we'll just share a couple of links under this video with hints and tips that are really might help you with a few extra things. But other than that, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Tom, for your time this evening. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you again soon for another Facebook Live.
Thanks for the opportunity, Claire. I enjoyed meeting you all out there.
Yeah, lovely. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Tom.